Welcome to the 2025 CanWCC Fall Town Hall. Our title is New Government, New Economy, Same Old, which is a powerful title for a powerful conversation that we're going to have today, where we'll be looking ahead to the 2025-2026 federal budget with one question front and center. Will this government finally recognize the economic power of self-employed women and gender diverse people? So we'll break down the key points of our 2025 pre-budget submission and what we're watching for from the federal government in November 4th. Well, November, coming soon, November 4th. And we'll share where our advocacy has started and where we're going. We're going to talk about some critical moments that we're facing, what you should be looking for when the budget comes out, and we'll have some important conversations together today. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Jenna Clockley. I'm the Director of Membership and Community here at the Canadian Women's Chamber of Commerce, or CanWCC, as we call it for short. And I am so thrilled to be here with you today. I love our fall town hall. I love all of our town halls, but these are the places where we really get to hear from our founder and CEO, Nancy Wilson, and really talk about the advocacy work we're doing and that you are doing every day. So my pronouns are she, her, and I'm welcoming you to this event today from the lands of the Anishinaabe, the Cree, the Ojai Cree, the Dakota, and the Dene peoples, and home to the Métis Nation covered in Treaty 1, colonially known as Winnipeg, Manitoba. And the Canadian Women's Chamber of Commerce operates out of the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people in what is colonially known as Toronto, Ontario. CanWCC recognizes that its work and the work of our members take place on traditional Indigenous territories across the country. We acknowledge that there are almost 100 treaty agreements that cover the territory now called Canada, and we are thankful to be able to work and live in these territories, and thankful to the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people who have cared for these territories since time immemorial and who continue to contribute to the strength of Canada and to all communities. Now, we're just a few days out from Orange Shirt Day. Who participated in Orange Shirt Day this year? Anybody go out for a march or a walk? Yeah, that's fantastic. I did as well. And I want to acknowledge that across Canada, we still have an ongoing issue with violence against Indigenous peoples, and without much support or resolution and coverage. We don't know about it. We don't hear about it unless we search it out. And just to browse through APTN News had the following trending stories that don't seem to have made it to national news. Joshua Francis Salto, a 25-year-old man from Whitefish Lake First Nation in Alberta, disappeared on May 5th after winning a $1 million lottery. And he's still missing. I think we would have heard if somebody won a $1 million lottery and disappeared, but we didn't hear about that. Samuel Bird, a 14-year-old who has been missing since June, was recently determined to have been murdered by a 38-year-old man, and the remains were found just last Thursday in a rural area outside of Edmonton. A Mi'kmaq elder, Fred Sillaboy, was tasered twice by two members of the RCMP for refusing to give a breathalyzer on October 10th. Outside of his home in Asconi First Nation in Cape Breton. He was refused a translator as a Mi'kmaq is his first language. And the elder can be heard on the recording saying, "I don't drink. You guys don't understand at all. You guys have no understanding." And First Nations people in Ontario are still dying from opioids at a much higher rate than the rest of the province, according to a new report from the Chiefs of Ontario and the Ontario Drug Policy Research Network. Between 2019 and 2022, the most recent years with full records from the coroner, the opioid death rate for First Nations nearly tripled. In those same 2 years, 389 First Nations people in Ontario died from opioid overdoses. And by 2022, the First Nations people were dying at a rate 9 times higher than non-First Nations. 12.8 deaths to every 10,000 people compared to 1.4 for non-First Nations people to every 10,000. And it's not, it's not just individual stories like that we don't hear. There's national stories that, that do get national reach, but they're still not news status. So I don't know if you've heard about this, but I live in Manitoba. And on Orange Shirt Day, a fire was set at at the Minister of Family's office, Nahani Fontaine, in her West Kildonan constituency office. So she wasn't there because she was at our legislative building, but her office was set on fire. And that's not the first time this has happened. Her office has been vandalized several times. And it's not just her office. There was another Point Douglas MLA, another woman MLA, Bernadette Smith, who she's our provincial housing minister, and her office was also vandalized. And this is not rare in Winnipeg. This has been happening all over for both Conservative and NDP members, which are our two main parties here in Winnipeg. And we really need to be paying attention to these things, especially in politics as well. It's not an easy job to be a politician. But overall, we will not eliminate the racism and bias that's still present in Canada in this one call. But this is your opportunity to read different news sources like APTN. And that gives you a real insight into First Nation, Métis, and Indigenous people across Canada and their experience that they have, which is so different from what settlers have. But there are also really great things happening that you can hear about on APTN as well. Like one of North America's largest powwows is moving to downtown Winnipeg, and how after almost 2 centuries, the Shunamoose Nation in British Columbia is getting land back and $42 million from the federal government. And the artist that I played today, her name is Tia Wood. She's Juno nominated, and she just got signed to Sony Music internationally. So huge things are happening as well. And all of that I didn't hear on my national news broadcast. I found that by going to APTN and looking for this information. So this is just a reminder. Go out there and look for that information, because it doesn't always come to you, and it helps keep you involved in these communities and understanding the issues that are facing them as well. But now I'm going to introduce our guest, Nancy Wilson. Nancy, and I'm going to turn the conversation over to her. So let me introduce Nancy. Nancy is the founder and CEO of the Canadian Women's Chamber of Commerce, a chartered professional accountant with 2 decades of experience across startups, multinationals, and not-for-profits. Nancy led an accounting firm focused on women entrepreneurs. Frustrated by the systemic barriers, she launched the Canadian Women's Chamber of Commerce in 2018, growing it to over 1,000 members, securing $5 million in funding, and forging over 25 key partnerships to date. Nancy is a driven and accomplished feminist leader who's passionate about financial literacy, changing the status quo, and advocating for economic equity. So welcome, Nancy Wilson. I'd love to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Jenna. Hello, everybody. I also love the Fall Town Hall. Fall for me is, my birthday is in September. Fall is also, when kids go back to school. And so it just has like a feeling of, new potential and all of those things for me. So, and I love policy, and with the budget coming out, it just has that feeling of new potential. So I'm really excited to talk about the federal budget and share some of what I've learned doing some research over the past couple of weeks with you, as well as what's coming for our advocacy. So let me share my screen. Present. I'm gonna make this full screen. How do I? Okay, great. So the organization of this presentation is in 3 steps, basically, past, present, future. So first I'm going to talk about what CanWCC has done in terms of advocacy work since we last met, which would have been the spring town hall. Then I'm going to talk about our main focus, which is the federal budget And I'm going to talk a bit about current events as well. I mean, you know, that's the big elephant in the room is what the heck is going on in the world right now. Because there's a lot going on right now. There's always a lot going on, but there's a lot going on that impacts everyone on this call directly and significantly. And then I'm going to talk a bit about what our plan is for our future advocacy in the new year. I have a couple of announcements at the end of the presentation, and then following that, we will, as Jenna said, we'll go into breakout rooms to talk about some of these issues amongst ourselves, and then come back as a group and share what we talked about. So in terms of what we have been involved in as an organization and our advocacy over the past couple of months, this is us representing our members and our community and making sure that their voices are heard. Some of the biggest things have been, you know, Carney won the Liberal leadership race after Trudeau resigned in January, I believe, was when he actually resigned. Then, you know, there was time for the Liberals to find a new leader, and then in early March, Carney stepped into the shoes, into Trudeau's shoes as prime minister. He then announced his transition cabinet, and that cabinet did not include a standalone minister for the Department of Women and Gender Equality, or wage. So wage was actually included under the, what was it called? Minister of Canadian Culture and Identity. So this is not a good sign coming right out of the gate. So we were involved with and in collaboration with many other women's organizations in making, you know, that a piece of news and making sure that this was recognized, that you know, wage should be represented by a standalone exclusive minister, and that we weren't happy about this and that it was inappropriate. And whether that attention made a difference, hard to know, but regardless of the impact it had or didn't have, when Carney was elected as our new prime minister, his new cabinet did include a minister that was designated as the Minister of Women and Gender Equality, although she does have an additional portfolio under her name. However, it is not subsumed under a kind of vague title. So I consider that a win, and it is as it should be. We also joined as signatory on a number of letters that were sent to the government and published in media that were critical of the lack of funding that was laid out in the wage budget for the next 3 years. What the wage budget showed was a really significant decrease in their funding in the 26-27 budget, where a lot of these programs that had been announced in previous budgets were due to end their funding horizon. And because no new funding had been announced, plus there was a clawback of actual funding for personnel, the budget as a whole for wage just completely, like, really dramatically went down, and that of course is a major concern. Now, as as the Women's Chamber of Commerce, we are interested particularly in the Department or Ministry of Women and Gender Equality, as well as ISED, which is which is kind of a couple of different ministries grouped together, but ISED stands for Innovation, Science, and Economic Development. So if you're looking at, if you're kind of skimming the headlines, those are kind of the two ministries that we are most focused on, as well as the Department of Finance, right? Because they're the ones that fund those ministries, and it all kind of comes down from there. So let's move on to the present. I don't normally talk about the US. I try not to, because the US is so dominant in everything we read and hear and see. It's like the internet is owned by US media. It's owned by US tech, basically, which is unfortunate. But I think it is important to talk about what's going on in the US, because ultimately Canada and Canadians are affected and influenced by the United States and what is going on there. Certainly economically, we're affected. The tariffs, yes, those impact our economy. In terms of impacting women-owned businesses, what has been very significant in terms of economic policy coming from the States has been the removal of the de minimis exemption, which is an exemption for packages, for commercial packages crossing the border with an assigned value of $800 or less, being able to cross the border duty-free. So for many, many years now, Canadian businesses would have been able to sell small orders without incurring duty when they sell to American customers because of this exemption. But with the removal of the de minimis exemption, now a lot of e-commerce operators and retail operators, B2B, B2C, have been significantly impacted. And although, there are a couple of different ways to get around this, getting around it is not easy. And some folks are not able to get around it depending on the type of merchandise that they sell. So that has had a significant impact, because a lot of women do build their businesses in the e-commerce and retail sector, as opposed to, let's say, lumber or steel, which is where the tariffs are really coming down hard. But it is also significant to look at what's going on socially and politically, because that affects women and equity deserving groups just as much, if not more. So we have rising authoritarianism going on. We have the president sending the military to do whatever he feels is necessary domestically to cities within the country. And along with the economic protectionism, this is, these are signs that we've seen before in other countries that are extremely alarming. We also have the dramatic erosion of civil rights, and this kind of outlawing of any mention of DEI, which really means any kind of recognition of the contribution or the potential of women and equity deserving groups and their participation in the economy and in society overall. So terrible things are going on in the States. And when we turn to Canada, I think, in my opinion, there's a tendency in Canada for Canadians to look at the States and say, there's terrible things happening down there, but we're a little bit better than that, and that couldn't happen here. That won't happen here, and that is not true in my estimation. I think that we may be a little more polite or vague in our declarations, but those things in effect can absolutely happen here. So we may not have an anti-abortion law or have outlawed abortion in the same way that it is in the States, but if there are large areas of Canada where there are no abortion services available to the extent that women cannot access abortion, then the effect of that is the same, right? So I think that we need to be careful and critical in our thinking and hold our policymakers to account to make sure that we maintain the type of country, society, and living conditions that we want to maintain here in Canada. There's lots of discussion about, Canadian values, Canadian proud, build Canada, all of that stuff. I think that's great, but we need to hold people accountable to what that really means. And so I'll talk a little bit more about what the budget is probably going to look like, because when I made this presentation, it was before Carney had made his speech that he did last night. So I have a little more clarity now that he's made that speech about what it's going to look like. But certainly there has been a general silence on Black, Indigenous, and people of color, those communities, and generally silence from the government on the contribution of women to the economy. Now, there has been some exceptions to this. One exception is this petition that was put up by the Conservatives recently. So they have broken the silence by making their position clear, or at least the position of some of their party members on DEI. So this type of thing really, I think, is a good counter argument to, well, that type of thing won't happen in Canada. And then the current Canadian government also broke the silence on women and equity deserving communities. I have to, give them their fair dues. Why isn't this doing it? So they did announce funding for the Black entrepreneurship strategy through to 2030. So this is a current part of that Black entrepreneurship strategy called the Ecosystem Fund. The funding also supports the Black entrepreneurship strategy loan and there's a knowledge hub associated with the Black Entrepreneurship Strategy. So all of those, it's been announced that that funding will continue to 2030. So these slides are, it's the Wild West. They are doing whatever they want. So in terms of what CanWCC submitted, every year there's an opportunity for organizations or individuals to create what's called a pre-budget submission, or which is essentially a written document with recommendations for what you want to see in the upcoming budget. So since CanWCC launched in 2018, the organization has created a pre-budget submission and submitted it every year. And so for this 25-26 budget, we submitted our brief this past August. And the recommendations that we put forward were to, one, restore wage funding. So to put funding back into both the department for operational costs, as well as to either extend those programs that were set to end, or to work with the department to and stakeholders, I suppose, to create other programs that would receive funding. So we wouldn't see that dramatic drop in funding would be corrected essentially by establishing future funding. So WAGE has a really good record in terms of the amount of government funding they receive that they actually pass on to programs in the community. So they're one of the government, one of the ways that the government actually flows through funding to not-for-profits and charities that serve women and gender equality in the community, which I think is a primary reason why they should be funded, because that's what government should be doing, is engaging these ministries as a funnel and a critical sort of pipeline to direct government funding to those in the community that need it the most. And the second recommendation was we put forth an argument regarding self-employed women and the support that they need via government policy as well as programs. So what to watch for? This now, nothing on this slide changes actually, but I'm gonna just talk very briefly about the speech. So Carney gave a speech yesterday where he kind of laid out what the budget might look like. And he laid out sort of three categories of spending: protection, building, and empowering. And if anyone knows me, they know how I feel about the word empowering, but I'll just put that aside for the moment. So under protecting means increasing defense spending. He's going to hire more police, more border services officers, increase the military. Talked about harsher bail and sentencing legislation, a defense investment strategy. So he's talking about manufacturing military equipment, planes, those types of things in Canada, whereas before we used to buy those things from the US. So that's protection. And he referenced sovereignty when he was talking about this idea that like we need to be safe. Then building. So he is really passionate about building, nation building, major projects, building homes. He has established a major projects office. And so this office is sort of a centralized clearinghouse for these nation building projects, which are, you know, high speed rail between, you know, two major centers, pipelines, and mining. Those are the big ones, plus building affordable housing. That's the other one that's in there. So he was talking about how these major projects are going to create hundreds of thousands of well-paid jobs, unionized jobs. He mentioned that multiple times. He said, and I quote, "It's a great time to be in the trades," which I thought was a little strange because he was actually giving this speech to a bunch of people who were graduating university. But who knows? He talked about steel being manufactured in Canada again, which was used as an example more generally for this Canadian building effort would use Canadian-based materials. So this whole idea of we're going to reclaim our destiny, we're going to do the building, we're going to manufacture or use Canadian-based source materials in that effort. Everything is going to be based here. So very much like a protectionist stance to rebuild our economy here. Not so different than what's going on in the States, with the exception of sort of these external tariffs to other countries. In fact, he stressed the fact that Canada has trade agreements with all of the countries in the G7, I believe, and Canada does have excellent trade agreements with all sorts of countries, and we're continuing to sign those trade agreements. So, women business owners, only 10% of them are actually engaged in export, but to the extent that women business owners are engaged in export, they can take advantage of those trade policies. Then when he talked about empowering, this was a little less concrete. He talked about some tax cuts, protecting the most vulnerable. He did say dental care would be continued, school food program, a national lunch program, I think, for school children. And he did say that the national child care program would be continued. So on the other hand, that's good news. And typically childcare is the nod to is sort of code oftentimes for this is what we're doing for the women. It is certainly what other chambers of commerce have used as their primary platform for our women's strategy is we're going to back childcare. So I don't know if we're going to see anything in the budget beyond childcare, but I hope we do. He did repeat multiple times, at least twice, fortune favors the bold, and he was sort of weaving this story about, after World War II. Oh, he talked about hinge moments, right? So this is a hinge moment, or like a pivotal moment in history. He referenced World War II as a hinge moment, where actually it was a similar strategy of building infrastructure, which kind of revitalized the economy. Then he referenced the fall of the Berlin Wall, and then the liberalization of the economy after that. And he was making reference to himself as he kind of went through his early career and benefiting from that. So it was an interesting speech. It's only half an hour. I fully recommend listening to it. It gives a good sense of where things are going, I think. But ultimately, I hope that we're going to hear more about business owners that are not in big industry, meaning manufacturing, mining, the extractive industry, or big tech like AI, because it seems like those are the ones that are being really invested in. But we will see. The other thing is there's going to be a new presentation with the budget. So they're going to break apart capital spending and operational spending. So capital expenses, these are investments that will yield future benefits. So this is what he's talking about in terms of building infrastructure, investment in affordable home building and that kind of thing, building mines, building pipelines, all of these things, investment in ports and whatnot. And then there's operational expenses. And these are the annual expenses to run the government programs, to pay for public sector employees, that kind of thing. And so the reason for this new presentation of the budget, or the separating out the two types of spending, is a more transparent accounting of how the government spends its money, and to divide up sort of the contribution to the deficit between the two types of spending. So, you know how sometimes when you hear people talk about like good debt and bad debt, so like if you take on a mortgage, it's like, yeah, you have this huge amount of debt that you're carrying, but it's good debt, right? Because you're building equity. You have an asset that you own that you can leverage against. But if you have a bunch of credit card debt because it's just been spent on essentially, groceries, clothes, gas, keeping the household running, that's operational spending. And you shouldn't go into debt to operate your day-to-day living. You should live within your means. So what he wants to do is to claw back the operational spending, so that the government spends less money day to day on day-to-day spending, but that the dollars that they're investing in these big projects are separated out so that they can say, look, yeah, the deficit is increasing, or we're in the hole, but we're in the hole because of these investments that will yield us huge benefits in the future. So it's okay. That's what he's proposing. And it kind of gives it gives a counterpoint to what his opponents or his opposition may say when the budget is put forward, because the opposition is going to say, government's spending too much, this is ridiculous. Look at how much spending is in this budget. We need to claw back spending. And the liberals can say, yeah, this is a lot of spending, but the spending is investing in future gains. So let's talk about the future for CanWCC. So we haven't nailed this down completely, but our strategy as a whole at CanWCC is to continue to put more and more power and decision making in the hands of our members, and that is true for advocacy as well. So our commitment from the beginning has always been to ensure that all voices are heard, and that our advocacy is available to everyone that supports our mission, and that advocacy is free from financial barrier. And so we introduced the free community membership to kind of achieve that goal of being able to advocate for everyone, regardless of, to remove the financial barrier. Our role is really to provide tools and infrastructure for the membership and the community to engage in organizing and to provide us information to advocate on your behalf. But in the future, what we want to do is to actually provide additional tools and infrastructure so that members can advocate on their own behalf as well and be engaged in that advocacy process. And so CORDS is an example of this evolution of our strategy for putting more power and tools in the hands of members to actually self-organize. And so that's what we're looking to do in the next year with advocacy. So like I said, we haven't hammered out all the details, but stay tuned. This type of thing is coming in the next year. Announcements. So we received an extension on our Flip the Script project funding. And so applications are opening today for a Flip the Script investment readiness program. So this is a 2.5-month program that starts in mid-January and goes to March 2026. It is available to women and gender diverse people, especially those who live in rural, remote, and northern communities. But if you don't live in those communities, you can apply as well. Successful applicants get access to Control the Conversation, which is the core Flip the Script course, and Business Financing Fundamentals, which is a finance course, obviously. We're also holding training and networking events. So everyone in the investment readiness program will get priority registration to those events. So the applications are open today. And taking action. So we've developed a CanWCC census. So this is really drilling down to find out who our community is, collecting the demographic data. It's not fun, okay? This isn't going to be fun. The census isn't fun, but this is so necessary for us, and because of our advocacy, right? This is step one in really amplifying our advocacy, because when we go to policymakers, or when you go to policymakers, they're always going to ask, well, so who's saying this? Give us a breakdown of your membership. Like, where do they live? Who are they? Blah, blah, blah. The government is obsessed with data, and they won't have a conversation until you've satisfied their lust for data. It's their favorite tool to put off having an actual conversation about systemic change. And having data is great. So we really need everyone to complete this census and tell us who you are. All of the data, although it asks sensitive questions about who you are, how you identify, it's all anonymous, and we're really just collecting the information to amplify our ability to advocate on your behalf. Finally, okay, this is a serious announcement. After 3 years of just amazing community development and membership work, Jenna, our Director of Membership and Community, has been offered an amazing role from the University of Winnipeg that is really going to build her career. And so I'm so proud that she is moving on and building her career. But I am sad to lose her as not as a community member. She'll always be part of CanWCC, but I'm sad to lose her in her role as Director of Membership and Community. So I just wanted to say publicly to everyone who's listening to either the live or the recorded version of this event, how much I value Jenna as a member of the team, as well as a friend of mine, and how she has really transformed the membership strategy and the way that we connect with our membership here at CanWCC. And thank you so much. Thank you, Jenna. I really, really appreciate people taking the time to attend this event. I know that time is precious. So thank you so much. And thank you for being part of CanWCC.